I'll begin the meeting so we have a call to order. So the clerk would note who's present at the meeting. Okay, the first order of business is approval of the minutes of the meeting of January 12th, 2016. So
Mr. Vice Chair, Sherry had asked me to mention that I had requested that the minutes be amended, and they were, so I'll just point that out to everyone to be sure that everyone's aware of that. And that's on page 9. And what was added was, you might recall that I read the mission statement into the minutes that Chairman Stradley had requested that at the last meeting. So Ms. Philo added that to the minutes, and I think perhaps we might want to actually attach a copy of it to the minutes, because there was some discussion at the last meeting that there's a possibility for change with regard to it. So since it's not stated in its entirety within the minutes, I would recommend that we attach or suggest that we attach a copy of it to the minutes if everyone believes that would be appropriate.
Okay. Other comments? Other additions, changes, proposed deletions to the minutes?
I'll move for approval with the additions.
Okay. Could I get a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. That passes.
And may I make one other comment? And this, again, Ms. Philo had suggested that I do. At the last meeting, and it is part of the minutes, that we would have on today's agenda the question of FMPA representation, and that was whether it should be an elected official or a staff member. It is not on the agenda. I don't know how long the program is today, so I'm not saying that we necessarily need to have it on the agenda today. That's something we can discuss now or perhaps later after the presentations have been made. But just to note that it was requested by the chairman at the last meeting and does not appear on the agenda today. I would also mention that yesterday at the Finance Commission meeting, they received an update on electric utility, and I'm not sure what that was, but perhaps that's something that we also should receive. It was on their agenda. And finally, before we begin the presentation today, and I know we have other things to do first, but I would just like to, and not right now, just like to establish the context before Mr. Bolton speaks. Since I was the one who requested that he attend this meeting, I would just like to establish for the record the context. So thank you.
I didn't understand your last comment. Could you say that again?
Could you speak into the mic, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't understand your last comment.
Before Mr. Bolton, I believe will be at the meeting today. He is on the agenda, and my request was that before he makes his presentation, I would just briefly like to explain the context at the time and why I requested that he be present.
Okay, fine. All right, let's move to public comment. Is there any...
Mr. Co-Chair, are you accepting changes to the agenda or additions to the agenda?
Sure. I was going to cover that in number 4.
Oh, I'm sorry.
New business.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Okay. So, is there any public comment? Okay. All right. Let's move on to new business, and we can talk about any potential changes to the agenda. So,
I'd just like to bring up something that's on point in the agenda about the Florida Power and Light application for groundwater usage.
Well, okay.
It can be later in the agenda. That's fine. I just want to have a moment to talk about that.
All right. Okay.
What you would need to do is vote on if you want to accept the additions, which would be 3 additions to the agenda.
Okay. Could you just read the additions, please?
The additions would be the FMPA representation, update on the utilities, and the groundwater usage.
Okay. All right. So do we need to vote on them separately?
A consensus of just amending the agenda would be fine.
All right.
Everybody's in agreement.
Somebody will make a a proposal to amend the agenda for those three items.
May I ask a question first? Do we know how long the program is right now, the presentations?
No.
No?
No, we don't know.
Okay.
You can say that if you have the time to discuss all three, you will, or you can put that in your motion.
I'll move to have the motion to add those items after we do the presentation.
All right. A second on that?
I'll second that.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. All right. Passes. All right. Let's move on to the water quality presentation by Mr. Bolton.
Okay. May I establish the context for that then? As I invited Mr. Bolton, I attended the, and I'll be very brief, I attended the City Council meeting last week where actually the water quality and the outage were not on the agenda. I brought up the matter during public comment. And what I said, and this is just an excerpt, and it was an objective statement on that day, which was Tuesday, February 2nd, last week. Our community cannot drink the water today. This is the most serious breach of public trust that elected officials can incur. There are no public matters more important than the matter of sanitation and clean water. The very existence of society depends upon it. This failure to protect the public was compounded by the Council's inability to communicate with the public. Ironically, that deficiency was on the agenda on that date, and evidently the Council has been aware of it for quite some time, according to the attached memorandum, but has not acted on it. I then invited the public to this meeting, and I'm glad to see Council members here. And I will say that thank you, Mr. Bolton. Thank you again. I did speak with Mr. Bolton on Monday of last week, which was the first full day of the precautionary advisory, and he readily agreed to attend our meeting and to explain to us and any members of the public that care to attend or to watch the video or read the minutes exactly what happened. So we certainly appreciate that. Thank you again. And at the City Council meeting, I suggested that perhaps robocalls might be considered in order to inform the public. There was great difficulty, and this was acknowledged by everyone, that there was difficulty in getting this information to the public. And I volunteered to help Mr. O'Connor to accomplish this. In fact, today, after this meeting, I will be meeting with him to work on that project, to avoid the kind of confusion and upset that existed at that time. So everyone is aware of the problem, and we're going to work on it. And thank you again, Mr. Bolton, for being here. And I'm hoping, I know this is a highly technical matter, but I'm hoping that you'll be able to explain it in a step-by-step fashion, and to the extent possible, use layman's terms so that the community can understand it, if they wish, to review this or to read the minutes at a later date. And thank you again for being here.
Good morning, Commissioners. Rob Bolton, Director of Water and Sewer. That's why I was planning on speaking through the process versus schematics and drawings and everything else. It would be a little confusing. Last Sunday, what occurred at the water plant was we had a power outage that ultimately resulted in loss of pumping capacity to pump the water from ground storage tanks that we had at the treatment plant out into the distribution system. I'll go through kind of how our system was originally set up, and then I'll describe what the failures were and what occurred. Currently, there are 2 water treatment plants at the water treatment site up at the airport. One is a lime softening plant. The other is a reverse osmosis plant. Both of those treatment plants, the water is combined together and mixed, and then it is pumped into ground storage. There are 3 tanks at that site. One of them is 2 million gallons. The other 2 are 1 million gallons. So there's 4 million gallons of capacity that are normally kept full. In case of, just from normal operation standpoint, they're always kept full.
Is that a reserve then, in effect? I mean,
It's actually a buffering capacity, so you use it for a couple things. One is in case there's a fire and all of a sudden you need a bunch of water for something, you have the capacity for that. If you have large demands on any given day because of droughts, then we have that demand. So normally what you try to look at is there's capacity there to buffer anything where you don't have pumping capacity to get the water or to create the water to put in the tanks on a max day level, plus any 4-hour fire demand. That's how you kind of design your storage. Our capacity at our water treatment plant is 16 million gallons. Our max day demand that we see anymore is about 8. So we have plenty of treatment capacity. So that's really not an issue. Our water plants were not over designed. They were built at a time when we didn't have reclaimed water. So they were built for irrigation demand on the barrier island that required a lot of water to be used for irrigation purposes. Mm-hmm. Since the introduction of reuse in 1992, our plants are operated at probably, on any given day, probably 35% capacity on up through maybe 50% capacity on a max day type scenario. So we have a lot of storage. We have a lot of pumping capacity.
May I ask you, the water that's stored, and I know that there was no contamination, but the water that's stored, is there the possibility that could be contaminated in a situation like this?
No.
So it's already through the system, so to speak.
It's already through the system. It is already treated. It is already chlorinated. There's no issue with the water that's in ground storage. On top of this, let's move from now. We have capacity at the plant. We have the treatment capacity at the plant. Your next point of design or of providing a service is the pumping capacity to pump the water out of the treatment facility, out of ground storage, out into the distribution system. So that system, again, we have way over capacity for, we could probably pump 21 million gallons of water out in any given day. We have 9 pumps there at the water treatment plant. We have, your next concern would then be, well, how do you keep power to those 9 pumps? Mm-hmm. Okay, so the way that the pumping is designed up at the water treatment plant, at the lime treatment plant, all of those pumps are provided power through that treatment facility. Okay.
In terms of daily usage, this I'm going to call it buffer zone, buffer water. How long would that last? Is that a half day? In terms of usage by the city, is that a half day supply, a day supply, a week supply? Just so we have some kind of idea.
Probably on any given, we usually. Well, this month, for instance, we're probably producing 5.5 million gallons of water a day. During the drought, we may push 7. During a rain event like we had a couple years ago in October where we were dumped with a foot of rain, that whole month we were probably only producing 4. Because everything was saturated, you didn't have an irrigation demand. So our range is pretty much from 4 million gallons a day to about 7 million gallons a day. The treatment plant there has 4 million gallons of storage. We have an additional 2.
And I'm sorry, that's how much is produced?
No, that's how much is stored.
That's how much is stored. And how much of that is used per day, if you know? And I'm sure it varies by season, but generally.
Let me try to put this in another scenario. There's tanks on the property. So we're treating water. It's almost like a big cup or a bucket. We're treating water, putting it in the bucket. We're then pumping the water out of the bucket to distribute to the homeowners. So the concept is to keep the bucket full. Mm-hmm. There's no way that the demand of the customer is ever going to exceed what we have in treatment capacity. So we can always treat more and put it in the bucket than we can pull out of the bucket. Mm-hmm. So that's really not the concern as much as the concern is keeping the power on to those pumps to pull the water out of the bucket.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
And so with that, there's 9 pumps at the lime softening plant. 2 of those pumps can also be powered from our reverse osmosis treatment plant. The lime softening plant, the power feeds into that facility come from 2 substations. So one comes from substation 5, the other comes from substation 6. The reverse osmosis plant, the power feed comes from substation 5 only. By law, because we have 2 feeds coming from 2 different substations, that's all that we're required to have. Now, that's not what we do have. On top of the 2 power feeds coming from 2 different substations, we also have a backup generator that will generate enough power for the entire plant facility there. Then, once it's powered, in either case, whether you're powering from commercial power or from a backup generator, there's pretty much a computer. It's what we call a programmable logical controller, a PLC, that controls the pump's starts and stops and the sequencing of when they run based on how many hours they've been running for any given time. And then when one shuts off, then it cycles through, goes down a list, finds the one that ran the least, and starts that one the next time the pump is called for any additional demand.
Can I ask a question regarding the backup generator? How much fuel capacity does it have? How long can it run with the fuel that you have?
About 3 or 4 days.
Okay.
Yeah. So, in the instance of on top of that, so we're talking about we're redundant on top of redundancy. So the first level of redundancy was you had a second substation to power your plant. Then the next level of redundancy we had in place was that the generator is there to run the pumps. After the 2004 hurricane, when we lost that lime softening generator because it ran for 6 or 7 hours and then shut down, not only did we replace it, but we went ahead and started powering 2 of the pumps, or 1 of the pumps really, from the reverse osmosis plant site, so that if the generator at the lime softening plant failed, there would also be the ability to run 1 of the pumps from the reverse osmosis plant to keep some type of water pressure in the system. On the night of last Sunday, or what was it, the 1st or the 31st, what we had a failure was the power failed, the generator came on, and then the PLC had a failure. Now, the PLC didn't fail itself. What failed was there's a battery backup system for that PLC.
And what is the PLC again?
It's like a mini computer. It's not like it's a simple computer. They call it a programmable logical controller. So it just has a job, and it just looks at that job, and that's all it does. It doesn't have really interface out there with the internet or anything else that could confuse it. It just does a job. So what happened was there's a battery backup that normally would power that PLC during the occurrence of when the time outage of when the main power goes off and then the generator kicks on.
So it acts like a UPS.
It acts just like a UPS. The problem was it wasn't the battery in it, but there's constantly a battery charger that's charging the battery. And then when it needs the power to power that PLC, it's almost like an inverter or a generator or whatever you would have. That's what failed. So getting the juice out of the battery to convert it to 120 is where there was a failure in that piece of equipment. So we have, the equipment was tested every month. We test it. We test that whole process the first week of the month. So it was tested the first week of January. It just happened to be on the 3rd week of January when we had the failure with it. It would have been tested this week or last week again.
So it's a battery then, basically?
It's not battery. It's a battery backup system that failed.
System.
So it was truly the system, not the battery. And that was a little bit
just
of
in trying to understand it, because you never know when your battery is going to go, like a car battery. That's why I'm trying to understand
Think of it as your battery charges your starter that starts your car. And it was the starter that went bad. Okay? That would be more or less the layman's term for it. So we replaced it. Everything is fine at this point. We are also looking into, and we haven't found a company that can can do it yet, but we're searching to see if we can have 2 battery backup systems that are there with a auto transferring switch that if it senses one, if it's not getting the power out of one, it immediately switches to the other. Now, we don't know if it'll be fast enough, because what happened was the power went off, the power on the generator came back on, but because it's fed through that battery backup system, the PLC went into an error failure. So you physically had to go over and push the button and reset the PLC for everything to start back up again. So what we have to do is check to see if whatever we can purchase and get set up is going to be fast enough that it doesn't send the PLC into an error failure and still require the somebody physically starting it at that point. On top of that, we have put in safeguards that are mechanical switches. So at the RO treatment plant on pump number 8, I think it is, or 9, we have a mechanical switch that even if all the power failure occurs and the PLC goes down, once the power from the generator comes online, there's a mechanical switch in there that once it senses the pressure to drop below 50, it'll automatically close 2 contacts and start that pump. At the lime plant, we did the same thing on a pump, now pump number 4, that it would do the same thing once the pressure drops to, say, 45. We're going to install it on a third one that if the pressure drops down to 30, it would automatically call it online. So as long as we would have generators producing power for the pumps, there's mechanical switches that are in there as backup to the PLC.
So as you're going through all this now, what you seem to be describing is you're looking for any single points of failure that can take the entire system down. So have you identified other ones other than this PLC and the inverter?
No, and we identified some of those things in the past, like you said, with generators and everything else. Just this PLC didn't show up until anything else is. This one's kind of touchy because we don't have a elevated tower in our system. So normally, if you had an elevated water tower, you have a buffering of there's 500,000 gallons or 1 million gallons or something that's in a storage tower that if power goes out, you have
gravity feed.
You have gravity that's feeding the system.
Right.
We don't have that. So in our case, on the night of the incident, probably about 4 minutes after the point of when the power went on and didn't start back up, pressure was getting close to that 20 psi mark.
Okay.
If we were in a high irrigation demand, you're down to 1 to 2 minutes before. So we do have operators at that water treatment plant 24 hours a day. So his first job is there's a power bump. I get up, or wherever I'm working, I walk down to the pump room to make sure that things are operational. He can turn pumps on manually as long as there's power available to him.
Right.
In this case, what happened with that, he went down there, but the pressure chart, unlike the old mechanical pressure charts that ran off of the water pressure itself, so when the pressure would have went down, you had an ink pen that was going around in a circle, and you have a chart that runs 24 hours a day. So it would have showed it was 65 or 67 psi going along, and then when the power went off, the pressure started to drop. The ink pen would have slid down going towards 0. In the case of this PLC that's controlling that chart, when the power went off, the ink pen just stopped. It doesn't send any more signal to capture what the new pressure is and relate it to it. So he walked over there, and the chart's reading 65 pounds of pressure or 67 pounds of pressure. He's like, okay, the pressure's good. He then heard an alarm over in the chlorine room and in the lime slakers. He went over to find out what was going on with those alarms when the chief operator of the plant got a call from somebody that was a customer that was on our system, said, hey, we have no water pressure here at the house. He said, let me call the plant. And he called the plant and was talking to the operator. And he says, look, I just was in the room. It said 65 pounds of pressure. And the chief operator said, well, if you're getting alarms at the lime slaker and at the chlorinator, then you don't have water feeding those systems. So you need to get back over and put some pumps in hand. And that's what he did. He went back down there, put 2 pumps in hand. The pressure came back on the system. So it was down for roughly 5 to 10 minutes. However, it dropped below the 20 psi requirement by law, triggering us as mandatory to put a precautionary boil water notice in.
Okay.
What specifically is the concern at 20 psi?
The concern is that the main concern in any system is there's something out there that is hooked up that could cause a back siphonage or a back flow. So your customer house, you might have something hooked up in your house that could pump something into the city's water system that could cause a contamination or anything else. The city, since probably I put it in place in 04 or 05, maybe it was 03, I can't remember. Every time we change a meter out, we put a dual check device in there. So it's not a non-testable device, but it's another safety, another redundancy there that even if it's in place, chances are you're not going to pump anything into the city's system. On any commercial establishment that has a hazard that we know of, they're required to have a device that they can't pump anything into the system. One of the concerns you might have is in a high-rise building that even if they have a backflow preventer, the guy on the ground floor might be getting any stagnant water that's up on the 6th floor that when somebody opened it up on the 6th floor and let air into the system and then he went to get a glass of water on it, all the water's dropping just like a high service tank would act with internal in the building. So there are concerns, and that's why the state of Florida says, you need to have a precautionary boil water notice. In other areas where you have elevation, unlike us here at the coast, I mean, we do have some elevation, but it's not drastic. That 20 psi would be the equivalent of roughly 45 to 46 feet of height. So if you have a hill or something like that, then, if the pipe down below, dropped below 20 psi and it was crossing under a waterway that had a lake on top of it, then there's the opportunity for groundwater to get into any type of leaking gasket or fitting or anything else that's in the water pipe system itself. That's a concern of the state. So therefore, taking all that into consideration, they wrote a regulation that said anytime it drops below 20 psi, you have to do a precautionary boil water notice. Now, the state of Florida Department of Health actually is the one that creates a guideline that you have to follow. So there's certain language that has to be put out in that notification. There's certain testing that we have to do to make sure that everything is safe before we lift that notification. However, they allow it to be lifted after 1 day. In the case of the city here, but you're required to test for 2 days. I talked with Jim and we brought it up with City Council, and I talked with the Health Department and I talked with the state of Florida, and it was in really everybody's best interest to leave it on for the full 2 days, because if you would have had testing on 1 day that came back fine, but then for some reason the next day you had 1 sample or 2 samples that came back and there might be a problem, then you're now putting back in place a boil water notice again for that affected area, and it could get very confusing to customers at that point.
Yes,
so
I think there was enough confusion already.
There was enough confusion already, so the best
I
thing
certainly
was,
agree with your decision.
we decided let's leave it on for 2 days. Both days came back with clear samples, so there wasn't any problem, which leads to the next conversation of, unless anybody has any questions on the failure itself and what we put in place.
Yes, I have a question.
Go ahead.
From the description that you gave of the operator's activities, 2 things come to mind. One is that it would have helped to have a direct reading pressure gauge somewhere in the system that doesn't rely on electronics, which obviously, when power goes out, you don't get a reading. The second thing is, it seems to me that maybe the operator or the operating instructions were not complete enough. If the operator wasn't aware that an alarm in the chlorinator section pretty much guaranteed that there was insufficient pressure in the system, he wouldn't have even gone to the chlorinator room. He would have stayed to see what was going on with the pumps and made sure the pumps were up. and that's an operations failure. And I don't know whether that's a question of training or procedure or what the source of that is, but I think it's something that needs to be looked at and corrected.
We are also, I skipped over it, we're looking into a mechanical alarm that's an audible alarm. Mm-hmm. Okay. So in the case of the operator, if there would have been an audible alarm that there was a pressure issue, then that's going to override anything. But because and you have to, the operator that we've had there has been there for 25, 30 years. He's well rehearsed, except for, like I said, where he might have started out using mechanical charts, so he's used to, and in his mind, he's thinking the pressure on that chart's going to drop. He wasn't aware that that's now an electronic chart, and it's not going to do that. So yes, there is some training that we will have to, enforce into the staff that's there. But on top of it, we're going to put in, just like that mechanical switch that will turn on that pump, that mechanical switch will have an audible alarm that you have to silence. So right in...
An electric alarm?
It will... Well, there's really nothing I can do if there's no electricity to run those pumps. So...
Understood.
Yeah,
but,
so it's a mechanical switch, but it's still going to be an electrical alarm of some sort, yeah, unless I do some type of a battery alarm.
Well, you could connect it up to a battery.
Yeah, we can do some type of battery backup on that audible alarm, yeah.
Understood. If the main power is out, he can't start a pump. Right. But at least if he knows that there's a problem, he can take other measures if they're appropriate. But yes, it seems to me.
Well, actually, can start a pump. That's why you have backup. But the backup failed.
Well, that was it. The backup failed. Yeah. So then you still have no power, so you still can't start a pump.
Understood. Okay.
But that does raise a question. As you said, the operator has been there a long time, is used to the system as it was, and now the system has changed. That sounds to me like there's a lack of, or an opportunity for training that should occur every time there is a change in the system, to make sure that operators are aware of the changes and what the implications of those changes might be. And that's really a management function.
Yeah, we'll work on that also.
I mean, I'm going to ask a very basic question. I'm not meaning to insult anybody. Is there a book of procedures that somebody opens up and reads a checklist down?
Yeah, every piece of equipment that we have has a book of procedures, and if there's failures, there's, these are the things to check for. The problem in this case is you're talking about 2 minutes. You won't even get the book open. You know what I'm trying to say, that they can go through. So a lot of those key things are routine. Like I said, his first thing is to get up and go check. Mm-hmm. And the problem with, your next thing is you can go outside and hear the pump is running. If we're on commercial power, you can hear the pump running.
Right.
If you're on generator, you can't hear that pump running.
Right,
all you can
because
do is
the
go over
generator
and
is so loud. Yeah.
It's so loud. All you can do is go over there and physically put your hand on it to see if it's running.
Yeah.
So those are things that we will instill, and even on that, the next day on Monday when I was here at the council, when the council started, there was a power bump because they were still trying to correct the electric issue. And we found out on that, we thought that if we left one of the pumps in hand, it would automatically start on generator, but it wouldn't. It had to. So they had we had 2 operators went down there, and they had to physically start a pump again. So even if you take it off of auto and bypass the PLC, we call it putting a pump in hand. It's not working automatically anymore. It's in hand. You physically have to engage that starter again to start that pump if the power even flashes off. It won't automatically come on. So that's why it wasn't a simple switch. We had to go through and determine that when we put a mechanical switch in, we have to bring it in on the same side as leaving the pump in auto and have it on the same side as hooked to the same terminals as the PLC would be to start it. So it's seeing is a close of a contact, and it needs to start. Whether it's coming from the PLC or a mechanical switch, that's all it knows, is the pump needs to come on. So those are the things that we're putting in, and we're looking at an audible switch, and even we were looking at some type of a Reb strobe light that's out by the so when he's walking, he can see if that strobe light's going. Then we know that we're down, and we'll set it at whatever we decide.
Or do both.
Or do both.
Yeah.
And they're not expensive fixes. They're thousands of dollars, but you're not talking millions of dollars to fix something.
So that would be a matter of sensors, I guess, because you're doing the testing, and the testing was not the issue. If I understand it, then the
Correct.
issue was more a matter of sensors, that the thing itself needs to inform the operator or monitor that there is a problem. Is that it?
There is a chart recorder. So you have a sensor that is sensing the pressure, and it's then electronically putting it to a pen, and the pen is recording it on a chart recorder. So not only do we have a computer that collects that data, and we have that data all the time, if there's a computer failure, we still have the backup of the data that's on a physical chart. That chart is taken off every day, and it is documented and stored. So if there was ever any question, you could always go back to the chart recorder, and then you can correlate between the chart recorder and what your data you're getting from your computer also. So like I said, there's redundancies in the whole system. It's just in this case, that one was something we didn't see coming. And like you said, there's 12 probably in the whole water and wastewater system that we have. There's probably 12 critical components, and we're reviewing those critical components to make sure that what we're doing, or if we're taking anything offline, that's a priority item, that maybe we need backup pumps or motors or something like that for those items.
Okay.
Which, do we have any other questions on this?
Well, I was going to say that in my experience in working in chemical plants, every pump had its own little pressure gauge on the outlets, regardless of what instrumentation there was going back, so that an operator walking down just looked at the pressure gauges as he went, and if they were in the right position on the dial, everything was okay. But it also gave you a little bit of an early warning if a pump was having some kind of a problem and the gauge was now starting to drift down because the pump wasn't putting out. You got an early warning sometimes before the instrumentation told you, you got a real problem. So I don't know. That to me sounds like real cheap belts and suspenders approach.
Yeah, we were looking at putting a gauge back into the operations lab itself, so that there's a gauge on the wall that's telling you what the pressure is at that point. And
I assume the operators routinely go through the machinery room, the pump room, whatever, and look at the pumps to see if there are leaks and water on the floor and oil, all that kind of stuff. Is that correct? So how often do they do that?
Yeah, but in the case of these pumps, they're not in a building. They're in a yard out on the site. So they're not an internal split case horizontal pump that you normally. We do have a couple of those still in our system. Majority of them are a vertical turbine pump in a can that's out in the middle of a yard somewhere. So yes, they do. The day shift makes all those rounds. The night shift guy, he's really just running the plant, taking samples, checking over, being a security guard the best that he can, and making sure everything's in compliance. The day shift, you have typically 3 operators on site. Night shift, second shift, and night shift, you just have 1 operator.
Okay. And you say these plants are out. These pumps are out in the open.
In the yard, yeah, on the site, but in the open. Yeah.
So, if you got a real bad weather situation, what are the chances that the operator is going to say, well, I'll wait until the rain stops before I go out and check?
Most of the stuff that he's checking, like I said, is internal into the buildings. Those pumps that are running, they are external. So, you always have those things on if it's raining in the middle of the night and he doesn't make his rounds. I'm not there. I'm relying on them as an operator, and they're licensed and they're supposed to be doing their job, but there's not a supervisor there in the middle of the night with them. These are licensed jobs. They're not, typically your hourly labor type thing. They're
Understood.
semi-professional people. So,
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions for Mr. Bolton?
now, if you want to talk quickly about what we're doing on communications, I'll run through that real fast. And that was our biggest
I would,
failure.
unless anybody objects.
That was one of the things you had brought up. Our biggest failure was our communication. And by law, we're required to put it into the newspaper, the local newspapers, and the media, the local media. We did that. We also put it on the radio, and we put it on our website. However, in today's society, everybody expects that smartphone to call them or get that Amber Alert or get whatever is else out there or to find it on Facebook. And we haven't elevated ourselves to that level yet. We're working on it now. Since this incident occurred, it was originally put out on the EOC. That our local EOC had contacted the city manager, and he said, yes, go ahead and put it out on the local EOC. And most of the people that had signed up for that got it. However, it set a big confusion because it said Vero Beach Water System. Well, Vero Beach is a brand. So everybody thinks that they live in Vero Beach, even though they don't necessarily live in Vero Beach. So they all thought that it was their water system. So that led to the mass callings on both our side and on the county side of, well, where's the boil water notice? How come I haven't been notified? And so that was the first level
Yes,
of confusion.
I heard that the electric customers are not necessarily the water customers. Could you differentiate those two groups, if you're able?
Yeah, well, I guess the easiest way to sum it up would be we have about 12 or 13,000 water customers, and there's probably close to 30,000 electric customers. So there's your differentiation. If you looked at, we do have a service territory map. If we want us to bring that back next time, we can show you where the outlying areas are.
Geographically, is it possible to describe it just very simply?
Yes. The whole city of Vero Beach city limits is both customers. The barrier island south of the 17th Street Causeway till the county line is both customers. Indian River Shores, up through Indian River Shores to where you get to the end of Johns Island. So it would be the
Old Winter Beach Road?
Winter Beach Road is the cutoff on the electric system. However, we still serve water north all the way up to excluding Marbrissa subdivision on the north end. So there's only one subdivision in Indian River Shores that's on the county water and sewer system. The rest are all on the city's water and sewer system. On the mainland, the water system and sewer system stops at 58th heading west. So it's the whole airport going west to 58th and north of 60. The cutoff then is 43rd south of 60. And roughly we serve down to 12th Street. If you looked at, 12th Street, the north side of the road is kind of the city system. The south side of the road is the county system. It jogs around a little bit there, and as you get closer into town, it gets really confusing. But once you get east of US 1, it's more county coming up to about where the wastewater plant is. But generally, those are the areas where the water system is. Now, on the electric serves farther south in those areas and much further west in those areas. And north along the boulevard up through part of Grand Harbor and everything that we stop necessarily right there at the hospital district is our line. So we serve the hospital, they serve everything north of the hospital. So, but we're working on communication. We're working with the county, and hopefully we'll be able to create some type of a sign-up alarm system.
Well, I think you mentioned at one of the meetings that you even have someone in your department who is good at that kind of thing.
She created a STEP application for our STEP system. That's an app that you can either get through Google or through Sharon Penrose. I'll give her credit. She's doing a great job. But she has created a app for our STEP system, and now we'll be looking at working with both the EOC and the county to do something similar. In talking with the county yesterday, they were able to data mine some of the information out of their billing system, and we can do the same. However, we don't know if that's a cell phone, a land phone line, what it is, if it can accept text messages. So you're stuck to just the robocall on that type of information. If you want somebody to get the information out there on a texting, then they're going to have to kind of come back in and sign up for those services. So we'll put some type of app service right on our website that they can go in, download the app, and update their information so that they can get push notifications and stuff like that from it.
Yeah. That's good.
I want to say something about the police department coordinating with their.
We're coordinating with the police department too. After when we had our first meeting on Monday and talked about it, the police department was able to help quite a bit in getting information out on. They have a sign-up service. It's a Facebook service, so they were able to push it out on Facebook, and I immediately started getting people that weren't even living in the city that were relatives of mine calling saying, "Hey, I saw this on," and I was asking how they got it, and they had signed up for the Vero Beach's police Facebook information. So that's another service that we'll be looking at coordinating with their system, with our Facebook system, with the counties, and working together to get. It'll be something that people will be able to sign up for if you want information on water and sewer, if you want information on electric, if you want information on the police, if you want information on recreation services, so that it's a full-scale notification and information system that you opt out of type thing.
I was going to say that you have a built-in system to notify all of your customers of any of these facilities that you're providing, which is your utility bill. If with each utility bill there is a leaflet or something that goes out and says, sign up here, so you will know when there are emergencies without waiting to see it in the next day's paper.
Yeah. Well, once we get it up in place, we'll get them out in the bills for people to go to that site and load it. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I just wondered if Mr. Bolton is going to leave, if we should talk about the Florida Power and Light while he's here.
I'll stick around and let Jim get through his.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Okay.
I just wanted to say I have a much better understanding of things
Good.
now, and I hope the community does as well. And I wanted to thank you very much for coming in today, and also, for speaking with me Monday when everything was was breaking loose. Thank you for returning the call and for readily making yourself available.
And thank you. I
Appreciate
mean, it's these opportunities like this that gets out to people that they have a better understanding of what happened. And there was a lot of scare from the Flint, Michigan issue.
Yes,
so there was,
I think there
because
was. Yes.
During the hurricanes, everything, we never had calls like this. So there's a lot of that's playing on people's mind of that, excitement of what do you mean there's something wrong with my water? So it was good to, and it will be helpful that we can get out to the people quicker next time.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Any other comment? Mark, do you want to make any comment on this particular subject?
Actually, I have a quick question for Rob. I hope it's quick. Mark Mucher, 617 Indian Lilac Road. I had a question going back to the failure and the redundancy. I thought I understood both the water and the electrical failure, having talked to Rob and to Ted. But one thing you said today struck a nerve, and that was that the water plant is fed, and the redundancy is that there's fed by two different subsystems. He's on the airport. There's an airport substation, and I understand the airport substation never went down. So if he's fed by a substation that didn't go down, why did he experience an electric failure?
Yes, substation 6 did not go down. However, at the lime plant, the way that the lime plant is fed, now we're going to get a little more technical, the 2 feeds coming into that building are both going through separate transformers that are 500 kVA transformers. So half the power for that lime plant and the pumping system is balanced on the substation feeding the coming from substation 6 for instance. The other half of the plant and the pumping capacity is balanced on the electrical load coming in from substation 5. However, there's one generator. So the generator can't power half the plant. It can only power the entire plant. So if either substation goes down, automatically the generator fires up and drops out that second commercial load that's coming into the facility.
Because you'd have an overload.
Right.
If you were running both
Correct.
the backup generator as well as power from one of the two substations.
Now, long term, there's what we call a tiebreaker in there, but it's a mechanical switch. So we have to calculate that we're not going to overload that other system, and we could power the entire water plant off of one load, but we just have to make sure before we do that we don't overload the system.
Got it.
But the safeguard is for automatic to switch to generator first, and then it's a mechanical switch over.
Right.
If
And
you
then-
were
and
if
you
you were
can-
into some type of long-term outage on that substation, I could still feed everything. It's just it would be only on. We'd have to balance everything correctly.
Right.
Okay.
All right. That was a good question. All right.
Also, just to add to that, if there's anyone on the Utility Commission who would like to take a tour of the water plant, please contact either myself or Rob, and we will set that time up for you, and you can actually physically see what is taking place and how the plant works. We've given tours at the wastewater treatment plant here recently to some folks that were just interested in how the mechanics and the operation of that plant were, and some of them were interested in the site itself, so we have provided for that.
Would it be more efficient if we did it as a group?
Well, you have sunshine issues. You can't go and talk and see everything at the same time. It's much easier if you have questions and it's one-on-one.
Right.
And
This is a good time to tour the wastewater plant, which was fascinating, but I toured it in very warm weather, and I think cooler weather would be better.
it's probably very true. The weather really does dictate, so it's an issue there.
But it was very interesting, and I'll get over the water treatment
and
also.
Unless you really
It really
physically
was.
see it and see, for
Oh, yeah.
example, where the operator sits, and something that Rob did say that's very important, our operators are licensed and certified, and they are very professional people. You have to have that certification before we can leave you at the plant and that license. And so they operate just like a nurse or a doctor or anyone else. If they do something really wrong, then those licenses are revoked, and nobody wants to give that up for the time and effort that they put in to acquire those, because it's a pretty extensive period of time and a lot of work. Okay, I'm here to talk about the electric, and I believe everyone has a copy. I apologize that we can't put the PowerPoint on the monitors, but we're having failures on our monitors. So it's
Electrical?
This has not been a good real week for us. Did everyone get? They all have it. Okay,
Yes.
Good deal. And what I'll do is I'll just sort of go through the overlays and then try to respond to any questions that you have. Ted is on vacation, otherwise he would be here. And please rest assured, I am not one of the people that get up on that pole and change out transformers and stuff. But I do read the manuals on them, so we do have that part of the area. But the overview that we're going to give here is the map of the service area territory that we have, the outage reporting procedures, the system reliability indices, and the reliability strategies. And these four areas are really the crux of what we're doing in trying to get our system and understanding that we are a going concern, and we understand that, and we want to make sure that we have that reliability is as important as pricing or any other part of what we have. The first slide shows you the service territory of what we have. In there, we tried to show that we have 58%, roughly 58% of our utilities distribution is underground. The city made a lot of efforts after the last hurricane to do a lot of undergrounding, especially on the areas that are facing the water up and down the lagoon, both on the mainland and the beach side, and then obviously on the beach side for the ocean. So the undergrounding was a major undertaking by the city, and we sort of have started running out of money when we started doing a lot of that work. But I think it has helped and given us that reliability in the majority of areas. And as you can see, the pink really does surround just about everything that we have in our distribution. The next slide.
If you, Jim, if you had the money, what would be your target in terms of that percentage underground? Note it's 58% on the slide right now. Where would you like to be?
Ideally, if we could get to 70 to 80%, going past 80% becomes sort of unrealistic. You can't put your transmission lines underground. You can't. I mean, there's some things that are going to have to be above ground. But if you hit that 70 to 80 mark, would be very good.
And what would that cost? Guess.
I do not know. It was millions of dollars for what we did to get where we are. So I don't have that figure. I can try to get that number for us.
Okay.
Has any analysis been done about how it would work incrementally? In other words, are there areas where it would be relatively cheap to go underground and could be tackled first or easily?
I think we did
where
the cheap.
It would be, I know nothing is cheap, but
no,
relatively cheap.
I think we did the relatively cheap with what we did. The rest of it is going to be the challenging. For example, take my neighborhood. Our power lines are in the back, and to underground through all the trees and the thickets that go up and down that one block would be, and I think that's the majority of what we have. I think the easy, low-hanging fruit, so to speak, has been done. Any developers, they have already put the underground, more than likely at their choosing, and they put in the piping and all that stuff. So, and we encourage that as the development goes on. But the rest of it is going to be would be very expensive.
Okay.
And 58% distribution-wide is a very good percentage if you go and look at other utilities. And in Winter Park, as an example, one of the reasons that they took back their electric system is to start doing undergrounding. So it's one of those that it's a major advantage, and it's a major advantage not only from the reliability issue, but also the cosmetic and aesthetics. So and that's usually what drives the demand. Most people don't remember the major outage you have 6 months down the road, or the hurricane. Nobody remembers other than we had a hurricane. What we did on this slide is the outage reporting procedure. We wanted to give you a diagram when we have a report of a power outage, where that goes. Some people say that we never answer the telephone, and I will tell you, when we had 50% of our customers down, it was totally overloaded. Our IVR system, and that's the interactive voice response system that we had. But typically that works and can give you an indication of we do have an outage, we are aware of it. Hopefully it'll be back up, and we put some time frames on there and try to keep that updated with our systems operator. Our systems operator sends those notices out, and also contacts and sends the crews depending on the type of outage that is being reported. Our SCADA system gives us an indication of what that outage really implies, and what crews do we need. Do we need to send a substation crew? Do we need to send linemen, or a combination? And so this diagram gives you how that flows through the organization. In this particular issue that we just had, this worked very well. We had plenty of crews on the ground. We had plenty of crews dispatched to the various centers on both the distribution as well as the substation crews. And then we have the reporting procedures to show you that we follow up everything with the paperwork. It tells you who called in, the time they called in, the type of call that we received. And it gives the indication that we keep the documentation as to where these calls come from, who calls, and how we responded. It also helps us for a management tool as to the call out of our crews. We give standby pay as provided by the union contract for people to be on standby, so we do require them to respond within a period of time and respond to those issues. The others and everyone in the electric department understands that they are subject to call. For example, if you're specialized in the substation crew, then at any given time, substation crews could be called out, especially when, and they have their meetings. For example, if we see a front coming in, that is a weather front, Ted and I will get together. He'll say, "Hey, I need some more standby guys, prefaced on this," and we'll work toward making sure that we have the manpower available to work with those crews. Most of our linemen are very seasoned people. They know and understand the system and are able to respond and understand the processes. So, but anyway, we do have the reporting procedures and the documentation that we have. We have our system reliability indices that give us an indication of where we stand to make sure that we all understand that, and we share this with our linemen and crews in the department, because reliability is a very critical factor to us. And so the L-bar measures the average and the length of a single outage, and we compare the system reliability indices with the cities and the municipal utilities. It's very difficult if you did it against co-ops or IOUs. You got to understand, as large as they are, in many cases the response time is going to be longer only because they have remote areas that they serve, and it's not, you couldn't have a service area, a service center in every 15,000 population center. So you try to compare where you have the municipal services. We get this information from both APPA as well as the FMPA that gives us these numbers. So it shows us where we are.
Okay, going back to page 6, so the system reliability index is a combination of these 4 bullet points?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And that's how, again, we internally measure our reliability. Okay. And then, as you can see on the L bar, that's the number of interruptions and the total minutes of the interruption. Pretty simple equation. And here is shown the single average length of a single outage for the month of October. Our outages average somewhere in the 39.93 minutes for an average of for the outage.
So this is just the L bar. This is not the total reliability index, or is the L bar?
The L bar is your total as it's measured in the time and length of the outage. So if you took our average in that month of October, for every outage, that was out for about 40 minutes, round numbers.
Okay. So this is just the average. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm a little confused. And the system reliability index, you're just not looking at how long we were out, but if you're out a lot and you're fixing it quick, that's still not a good thing. So that's where I'm confused.
That is correct. And so we have also the number of outages. And I think we used the month of December. The number of outages that we had a 54. Well, I take that back. That's still your reliability. I thought we had we do. For the month of December, we had 42 outages.
Okay, so you're just not looking at the L bar then?
That is correct.
Oh, okay, all right, that's fine.
The L bar measures what our response time is.
Understood.
How are the employees working in order to get to the thing? And so, yes, the number of outages is what we have. And as you can see, we have the causes of those outages. And, some people joke about, and for example, in December we had 42 outages, and people joke about the animals, but, 11 of those 42, which is roughly 25% of your call-outs, were due to birds and squirrels and those type of activities that are taking place. But it also gives us an indication. And then on top of this, we have another overlay that tells us where our outages are taking place, so we can respond to decide how do we address those. And further in here, it tells you some of the things, the measures that we are taking in order to do it.
May I ask you on that one, all remaining outages?
Yes.
On that, is that, what is that?
It could be a car accident. could be something that we don't know what the outage was for. For example, we get calls for outages, and it'll be someone's home, and we will find that the breaker switch broke. We don't know if it was on ours or if we don't know if it was something internal, but we go in and check the service line as well as ours to see if there might have been a bump. But that's still an outage call that we go to. Mm-hmm. Now, we don't call an outage if we don't call it a full outage if it's a partial power, because that typically is indicative of one or a couple of places being serviced by one area. So we don't call that an outage, but the outage would be when the power completely goes out. And so it could be any number of things that could take place there. You could have
well, you always know what it is, right? I'm just looking at it because it's almost half of the number, the all remaining outages.
You have a pretty good indication, but in some cases there's no way to absolutely tell what it was. I mean, it could have been a blimp in the system, and you have to try to trace it back, and in many cases you may not be able to trace it back.
So what percentage of this number do you think that would represent, where it's what we'll call it known cause or something like that, where you can't quite get back to it?
It probably would represent about 10 to 15% of that number.
Okay, thank you.
And that shows up, for example, when we have an outage on my phone, I get an indicator that says TD dispatch, and it says the outage and tells me when it happened, and then it tells me that they've dispatched the crew, and then when the operation's been corrected, the crew will write back in, and they'll put into that little note, it says the cause was this, that, or the other. In some cases, it'll just, the outage is unknown. Now, we don't go spend a lot of time going back and researching that unless we think it's something in our system. Mm-hmm. And then we would spend some time.
Right, if it's something that's repetitive, that you're seeing it month after month, is there a way to know that if it appears within this category?
Oh yes, if
there
it appears month after month, or if it's on a single phase and down in one area, mm-hmm. From our reporting system will tell us, hey, this is where a trouble area is, mm-hmm. and we will dispatch crews and then look at the entire system there, and we have ways of monitoring from point A to point B in the system at any given time. Mm-hmm. And then we'll check the transformers to make sure that they're reliable and those type of things.
Well, there's one category here which does sort of stand out, and that's under the all remaining outages underground. Those would seem to be less random events, in other words, cars knocking down power poles or what have you. That kind of indicates some sort of potentially indicates some sort of a system, I won't say failure, but weakness maybe. Has that been looked at? I mean, no. Do you look at that whole area there and say, well, what's going on? I mean,
are you talking about between?
Well, I'm looking here at the all remaining outages underground 13.
Oh yes,
which is 25% of your outages. That's a significant number. And can it be broken down, or has it been broken down into more specific causes?
In many cases, it eventually we find a cause, but what we do is break it down. And let's say these 13, and I don't have any idea where they were, but if they were concentrated in a section of along the Indian River Lagoon in one area, we would go in and then we would start tracing those lines to find out, for example, is there intrusion of water into that? Mm-hmm. In some cases, we may still have some direct burial lines in our system. Mm-hmm. And so we go back and try to run those to find out where the issues are. Mm-hmm. But yes, sir, we do check that. And especially if there's duplicate calls in one area and try to run that down. But a lot of times, they can go to the transformer and do the re-energizing of that and get the power back on. At that point, if it's the first call or something, we probably would not run that line down. The second or third call would indicate that we have an issue in that section of line, and then what we would do is we would go from one transformer to another and usually go out farther, and they keep backtracking to find out where that weakness is.
So that's focusing on the geographical aspect, but
Based primarily on where the outages are.
and is that the best approach, or because I mean there are other things which could be systematic. There would be a common cause, but they could be all over the system. Is what I'm. In other words, if there was a particular type of fuse or switch or something that was repetitively causing problems all around our service area, how would that be picked up?
Well, that would be picked up because of the calls. Ultimately, if you had a frequency of calls in an area and it became part of, let's say it's a breaker in the transformer, and we're seeing repetitive here, then we would take that type of transformer or that type of breaker that is there, isolate that brand and see what we have throughout the system that may be leading to that cause and may not have occurred yet, but may occur down the road. Then we would go and look at that particular brand of breaker and see what it is that needs to be done, replaced or otherwise. Because one of the things we're doing on reliability in here is trying to standardize the equipment to make sure that our system is got higher quality, better reliable equipment. That's one of the little challenges we have when you go out for bids and you get, the pricing differentials, because there are, as you know, lower cost items in other areas. We have sort of taken the high road on that and have made recommendations to the City Council that we don't necessarily always take the low bid. But the other thing we've done, and it's another skill level that we've learned over time, is we write our bids so tight that we make sure, now we do get complaints from vendors obviously, but we write them so tight we know what it is that we want to put in our system, and we're looking for that lifetime cost of operation as well as the reliability of the equipment that is there. But yes, we do have our brands, and under our equipment analysis we can tell you where we have put certain brand breakers and where other brands are in there as well. So we do run that down.
Thank you.
Based on the issues. So this tells you the causes of the outages in December, the page 12, the proactive measures, preventive maintenance, and those activities that we're up and involved in. And I will say the first couple of years that I was here, we were pretty lax on that. We sort of ran the system as a going concern, but at the same time, we were not really enthusiastic about putting in additional dollars into the system. We have come to change that strategy, and we know it's a going concern and one that we've got to make sure that our reliability is sustained and maintained over time. Some of the proactive measures we're doing, we've had some live front switchgear that was exposed. This was the standard in the industry at one time, many years ago, I will say. But so now what we're doing is we're changing out our switchgear, and this allows us to, for targeted circuits, to be able to have lower maintenance, and we can replace from the front switchgear, which is a safety factor to our employees as well as reliability of making sure that we can get that power restored. The again, the switchgear, this is the dead front, gives you another indication of what we're doing, and it tells you some of the history of what we're doing here. You can see the one that's on the page 13 on the top. That's some of the older materials that were still in our system that we're replacing. And then the live front switchgear that's on page 14 was a little newer, but again, the reliability issue, and we started the switchgear replacement of that as well. Then the 69 breakers, the substation issues are one of those that we had the oil circuit breaker, and that was again an industry standard many years ago. The oil breaker required a lot of maintenance and a lot of attention. So
do they have PCBs on them?
Hopefully not. We are a PCB-free system, but at one time there were PCB oils found in those, as well as your transformers.
Okay.
And
The items that we're looking at, are they in substations, or where are they actually? Just so I can picture it better.
okay, for example, these breakers are in substations, but they also could be in the distribution system, depending on where the transformer is located. Mm-hmm. But it's primarily in a substation. And these are going to your distribution feeders, so they have directly. The one on 15 is your 69s, which is your transmission. And so, again, we're going to the sulfuric compressed gas breaker. Again, more reliable, at the same time does not require the maintenance and attention that the oil circuit breakers required. Those are all in substations because that's your transmission. Your 13 kV panel replacement, these are in substations as well. And these are the ones where the distribution is coming out. And these panel relays work in conjunction with your substation operation. And again, we're modernizing, going to the electronic. Though taking from Rob's experience, we need to make sure that we have reliable backup to that and some type of measurement. Sometimes the old way is, it's sort of like your old breaker in your house, it's just one of those. It flips and you can see the little red spot. Mm-hmm. And so it's one of those. But again, the reliability is shown in the industry standards. This 13 kVA relay panel is much more doable. It also ties into our SCADA system. We've made some considerable upgrades in our SCADA system in the last couple of years, so we can make sure we know where our outages are and the type of outage that's in the system itself. But we're still working on our SCADA system in order to make sure that we continue to upgrade that. The more reliable the SCADA system is, the quicker our reliability to the customer is. So that's
so are these items in every substation then, or are there different kinds of substations?
Well, these are all in all. This would be in every substation, in the fact that it is a panel box that goes from your transmission to your distribution. Mm-hmm. Then the infamous squirrel guard. As you can see, that we're starting to put those on all of our transformers, especially the pole-mounted transformers, and which is what you have a picture here of. We're trying to do that and be proactive in preventing the squirrels going up the poles. Sometimes they can't tell our utility poles from the trees that they're usually climbing around in, which is where a lot of our poles are operated. The trip savers, these are phasing protections for outages. What they do is automatic reclosers as well, and allows us to have that when you get a blimp on your power, as an example, as opposed to the power going out for a period of time, these type of trip savers are what's doing that. Something hits against the line, trips it off, but these automatically trip it back on, and so it gives us the reliability, as well as, again, it's less maintenance on the operation. The bird mitigation, we are starting to put these on a lot of our poles and trying to prevent from those. If you'll travel around the state of Florida, a lot of people put extra, or the other utilities put extra poles up and let the birds nest somewhere else. And so we're just trying to discourage from being in our system.
What exactly are those things that stick up? And
They're just spikes.
Just don't give them room to spread their wings.
That is correct. Yeah. No, they are not attraction where we kill the bird. We don't want any part of that. But it's, this is a discouragement to go
200
your
volts
house
would solve the problem pretty quickly.
Yeah, it would take your power out as well.
The self-healing reclosers. This again is when you see a blimp on your system and it opens and closes. These are self-healing, which gets us back in the reliability in our distribution and allows that to take place, keeps your power going. The tree trimming. Tree trimming is a very point of discussion in the city of Vero Beach. We are a tree city, been a tree city for over 40 years. But at the same time, we understand that reliability of power is important. So we do tree trimming 5 days a week, 52 weeks out of the year, and we have crews, contract crews, as well as our own crews if we see areas that we need to get back into.
Can I ask a question on
Yes.
that? With regard to the outside contractors, do we have a procedure in place to review the work they do? The reason why I ask that is in riding my bike up down A1A with an outside contractor, to my admittedly untrained eye, I would have trimmed further back along electric lines. Now, from a contract perspective, the contractor wants to do the least amount of work and keep moving along, maximize the profit on the contract. Do we have anybody just take a look and see that they're hitting the parameters of that of the contract that you put out with them?
Yes, sir. In our contract, it tells you exactly what our cutting procedures are. I will tell you where you see lack of cutting back, that's telling me there's probably a neighbor on the other side of that tree that you don't see. Our contractor, whether he cuts one tree or 5 trees, he's basically getting paid for the day's worth of work. We have a supervisor that goes around and checks and routes what they're doing. But in the city of Vero Beach, as an example, we do try to work with the customer when they go in, especially when they go into backyards, but also up and down. A lot of people have planted oak trees for their children and all this, and nobody likes the V cut.
No, I understand. It's a tough situation. Okay,
Yeah.
I just wanted to see what your procedure was.
Yeah. And but we have specific lengths of cut that they're supposed to do, and the distance from the lines themselves.
Okay.
The other little thing that we get caught up in discussion with some of our customers, they didn't cut my tree back enough. Come to find out it's a telephone line or a cable line. We don't clear for cable and telephone, so we're...
Okay.
And this gives you an example of a crew over on 16th and 53rd as to going down the street and trying to clear the lines. Pole replacement. We are putting a lot of concrete poles in our system. It's, again, we are a hurricane community, so we've got to be able to have as much of the hardened system as we can, and we're working diligently to try to do most of those replacements.
Just out of curiosity, did the cable and phone people have to pay to put their lines on your concrete poles?
They do, but it's insignificant amount. Although I will say it's insignificant, but it really doesn't cost us anything other than that we have to manage if they start coming down, calls that we get on the system. But it is prescribed by the franchises as to what they put in.
Because there's still a lot of places that have both poles side
Yes,
by
there
side.
are. As a matter of fact, if you go down A1A, you'll see where FP&L have changed out poles, and the electric has been transferred, but cable or telephone or something else has not, and they have the pole standing out. And that oftentimes happens because the way I understand it, for example, the cable TV folks, they let a contract like once a year, and then they go do the system, and then for 10 or 11 months, you may not see another contractor to shift their system. And it appears that in telephone and cable, responding to down wires doesn't seem to be an urgency to them, so because we have a lot of people that complain about a wire being down in their backyard or in their front yard or somewhere, but we do dispatch somebody out there to check and make sure it's not one of ours. Yes.
Jim, in reverse, does the city have to pay to be on an AT&T pole?
No, I don't think there is such a thing as an AT&T pole. If there is, the answer is I'm not aware of us paying to AT&T.
And I'd like to say, because the last year we've been involved with bringing on an electrical system with 400 units. It's with the city of Vero Beach, and lots of times you hear a lot of comments about the electrical system. But I want to say that either under the city manager's direction, but Ted Fletcher and Chris Blanket and Stephen Chisholm, who are to me, the backbone of the electrical T&D over there. They have been outstanding to work with. If every department in a city and county were as responsive as they have been and as knowledgeable and reliable to count on, it would be a much easier process. So sometimes people don't hear the other side of the coin in working with folks. But from the very inception, when we did this, we met with Mr. O'Connor, and he brought the team in, and it's been an extremely responsive process. So I'd like to let that be known as well, because sometimes people just don't know how it works once you go behind the scenes.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And we do strive for the customer service aspect.
It's very apparent, at least in bringing a new system on. It's been a pleasure in dealing with the staff.
We want to get those meters spinning. Something else that we're looking at is surge protectors. We're looking at giving that as an offering to our customers. FP&L have these type of surge protectors, and so probably before the end of the year we'll be doing it. There'll be an additional cost to the customer for that, but it'll be located at their meter, and then we obviously be responsible for the maintenance of that going forward. There are quite a few of these surge protectors on the market today that would help us and help the customer in that reliability issue. A lot of customers already have surge protectors on their electronic equipments and TVs and that kind of stuff. So it probably would only be a small targeted group that would want to have this type of surge protector. But
so it's an option at an extra cost.
Yes.
Okay.
The technology upgrade to our crews in the field, Rob has done this in the water and is still in that transition. We're doing it in the electric, where we're going to be able to have our guys in the field with an iPad tie into the SCADA system, give them as much knowledge as we have as they're being dispatched to a particular location for an issue, an outage of some type, and they will be able to pick up their information. It's the outage management system, and it's going to be we think it's going to be a much quicker response to outages. They'll have much more understanding. Hopefully the equipment on their vehicles will be that can adapt to the type of outage they're responding to. So it's really going to help in that respect and give us the technology upgrades that we really need. The management system that we already have, the responder outage management system, it helps us in dispatching the trucks. So the guy in the field has it, and at the same time, the technology gives our operators sitting in the office as to what is being dispatched, where the general location of the outage is. The other thing that is very important on the SCADA system is the safety to the employees out in there. It helps the operator connect to the lineman in the field to make sure that we have current turned off in certain areas when they're working on poles, and that it's not activated accidentally in some respects. So we're working on the safety as well as the reliability in that particular case. The technology implementation, and if you're looking at page 28 on the left, is the OMS shows the location of the customer affected by the power outage, the location of the problem, in this case a blown fuse on the lateral line, and the dispatch truck on the right. One customer reported an outage, no other customers were affected, and the problem is on the customer's end. So these are two different types of outages that we have, but an indication of what we have. Example of what could cause an outage by a customer. Just in their home, they plug something in that shouldn't be plugged in. They don't know anything about the electric. First thing they do is call the electric utility. We go out and check it out. Another is if some people have a tendency to try to work around their house and they run in and hit their service line and knock it to the ground, then we have issues. We have seen indications where the meters have actually been almost ripped off the side of houses for some unknown reason other than the customers working around those. So, but we do dispatch, again, safety being an issue not only for our employees but the customer themselves. So, and
the two examples that we're looking at, would they fall within that category of all remaining outages from page 11? Are they that type of occurrence or occurrences?
The all remaining.
The one on the customers would probably be all remaining outages there. The problem in the green that's surrounded by the green, that's a blown fuse, so we know what that is, the lateral fuse, and that would be equipment failure more than likely.
Okay, thank you.
Page 29, the implication, this is the infrared gun. One of the things that electric utilities have done historically is had an annual flyover where they take a helicopter and they go over the sections of your system, and they do this infrared looking for hot spots that could lead to failure in the near future. And what we have done is we've gotten the infrared gun, and we can do a lot of it ourselves, and we sort of keep track, and we do a periodic review of the entire system, looking for these hot spots and looking for things that we need to replace or repair. And so we're using that technology as well. Again, that's more of a reliability issue than anything else, and trying to prevent issues from occurring on the system. The LED light conversion, which is on page 30, tells you that we're, again, trying to reduce our energy use, but at the same time, LED and that type of technology has less maintenance, and we're trying to reduce our costs for street lights and the maintenance that's required for that type of activity.
Do you know what percentage has switched to LED for like street lights and red lights?
No, I don't know. I think we're pretty well on our way with the signal lights on the LED. I don't know about the street lights. Don't know what the percentage is. The ongoing electric upgrades for our meter reading, what we're doing is going from mechanical to electronic. Currently, 40% of our residential customers have mechanical meters. The electronic meters require less maintenance, and testing for accuracy is much easier to test. We get a considerable number of calls. People want their meters checked. They don't think they're accurate, and so this will give us that almost instantaneous readout as opposed to running a mechanical for. It takes some time to really test the system on those. So going to the, and this is not the smart meters. These are the meters that are just electronic in nature.
Okay.
The electric system upgrades, the reconductoring. This has caused some of our outages in the fact that when we were doing the 69 on A1A, we had planned outages there, which we would isolate areas because we were doing this reconductoring. That line had been up there for many, many years, and so we felt like, and we started seeing hot spots showing up on it. So we replaced a lot of that. Again, the 69 system and our transmission is the backbone to our entire utility system, so we want to make sure that stays as reliable as possible. Things that we're going to be doing in the future, the fuse coordination for distribution electric system. Again, this is going to be a method by which we can go in and make sure that we understand the interworking relationships between our fusing of our entire distribution system. Relay coordination for the substation feeders. Hopefully this will be something that would help prevent the major issue that we just faced at Substation 7 and the outage that we had there. Substation switchgear replacement, you saw what we were doing in some of that replacement, especially getting away from the oil circuit and going to the gas. The overhead and underground conversion for problem areas, George's addresses yours, that we are isolating some of those, and as we see, not doing it on the point of ease, but on a point of where our reliabilities are being an issue, and looking at how we can sort of fund some of those capital projects. Upgrading standardization of equipment and materials. I told you that was something that we are looking at, and actually it's in place now. When our recommendations go back to the City Council, a lot of it is on standardization, and that standardization is based on the equipment that we have used over time, and we have results that indicate why we should be there. So we are doing that. The fiber optic installation for substation redundancy and communication. We have a backbone of fiber now that we're in coordination with the county and the school board. And so we have this backbone, and we can take our feeders off of that and make sure that our substations are feeding back into our management system, and be able to make sure that our operators have complete knowledge of what is taking place in the substations. We've cambered most of our substations. We'll do the same thing at the power plant when we do that, and it takes the need for a person being there on a routine basis, but it at the same time gives us that security that we can monitor from a third location. The training, we are sending our linemen as well as our substation technicians, as well as the folks in our offices to schools, to make sure that we try to stay updated on the technology changes in the industry. Electric utility is like everyone else. They're changing on virtually a monthly basis, and we're trying to keep on that curve where we can address the technologies that are taking place, and trying to make sure that we make those upgrades that have sustainability to the system, and it's not just a fly-by-night, let's try this one today and that one tomorrow. So our guys are getting trained to do that. The dispatching of our linemen, who are really the backbone to our system themselves, is the guy that gets to the issues and has to have that knowledge. We make sure that they have the training and the capability of addressing the issues in the field. So we continually send those folks to training. That's sort of an overview of where we are and what we are trying to do in the system. And again, we're looking at it as a going concern and managing it in that respect, reliability being a very important factor, as well as cost. Answer any questions?
Jim, if you could, if we could look at a concept similar to what's going on with the STEP system, and I don't know if there would be any other funds that could be available, but some years back when I was doing some remodeling on my house, I'm not in a community that's underground power, but I requested for the city that I wanted to run underground to the house. So I don't know if there would be a program that if individuals who don't live in communities that have underground power had some sort of assisted program or a program in place with the city to allow underground to go to their homes, you might find that there would be more people willing to do that because they have trees in their backyard. So I was motivated because I had a beautiful oak tree. The pole was right through the middle of the oak tree. Going back to a trimming process, sometimes the tree got all hacked up. So instead of that being an issue at all, I went to the city and requested, could I run underground to the house? So I don't know if there's a potential for some sort of program, but I know that if it's a relatively easy process, sometimes people will gravitate to do that because it would be a responsible and reasonable situation for them to have their power to the house underground.
We can look at that. The service lines are usually the last thing that we really look at. We're looking at the distribution, but there's no question there are outages due to the service lines, and the service line has to be paid for by the customer for those changes. But we can look at some type of incentive program to see if there's something that can be done on that.
Okay. Could you talk a little bit about your fiber optic backbone? I mean, how extensive is it? From what little knowledge I have of fiber optics, it's probably way over capacity in terms of what we're using it for as compared to what it can handle. Can you talk about that for a moment?
It's relatively limited in area, but there's no question everything that's been put in has plenty of capacity in there. And this was done several years ago in joint with the school board, the county, and ourselves. And it's sort of an agreement or convoluted agreement is what I refer to it as, because nobody really knows what it's doing. It was one of those to try to get service from municipal building to municipal building, and then from county building to county building, and school to school. But in that interaction and what it's done, but we have plenty of capacity. The question is where the terminus is and the origin. It's limited into where the communication can go. So we're sort of using it as sort of an internal, again, going back to our substations to be able to help that reliability. But we've got plenty of capacity to use it for that system. And for doing that, and we've had inquiries as to people tying on to the system itself, and that runs into some issues. And but we're trying to work through some of those, especially if it's someone, for example, at the airport, and because they are our customers, and to see if there's some way of doing it. But it places on the customer themselves, they have to extend that fiber optic, and that's where it becomes an issue, and then trying to get it to the outside world.
Did you have, or does it have redundancy built in to allow it to be expanded easily, or what?
Well, and I'm not that knowledgeable about the fiber optic other than some of the challenges that we've had on it, but I don't think it's really built in redundancy except for the fact that it has so much capacity in the lines. And do we have rerouting of the lines? We evidently do, because when we've had outages, they've been able to reroute those and do it. But I don't think we have the redundancy that would really be capable of providing for outside connections.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anything else? Okay, thank you for the review. Appreciate it. Okay, let's move on to the three additional items that were placed on the agenda. Which was the one where Mr. Bolton could address so we could get him on his way?
I think that was Judy's. May I ask just one question of Jim, though? This doesn't relate to what you were just discussing. Do you know what was presented yesterday to the Finance Commission, that update on electric utility? Do you know? There was no backup material attached to the agenda, so I don't even know that it's something we need to discuss. Do you know what it is or was?
No, they called on me, and that one item, there was no backup because I didn't know what they really wanted. I think that's put on the Finance Commission as a routine, just a line item, and they called me up and said, give us an update on the electric. Went over it, and I did not show the slide presentation, just said that, the outage that we had, but we're in the process of addressing the issues, so it was very general in nature.
So have we already covered that point then?
Yes, ma'am. That's what we did here.
So we've covered it. So I guess there are just two items now on the agenda.
Oh, okay.
Now,
right.
There was the other item on the impact fees, which we have recommended, and it's going to the City Council.
Yes.
Right. We had covered that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Right,
so we're down
so
to
there are
two
just two, and Judy's.
Okay, Judy, you want to go first?
Yes.
Okay, so I have talked to you previously brought up the Florida Power and Lights project that they're building in Okeechobee County. You want to take one and we'll pass them. And their intent they're in the process of applying for permit to withdraw 9 to 11 million gallons a day of water from the aquifer. And that consumptive use permit is currently in process. So there's also, just so you know, really close to that, I've just passed out two documents. One map shows where the Florida Power and Light plant is proposed to be built, and the other document is from a feasibility study for a utility that is owned by Evans Properties. It's called Groveland Utility, and their reservoir that they have a feasibility study to build, the intent of that reservoir is twofold. And one is to stop huge volumes of water from entering the Indian River Lagoon. And that, of course, would be a really plus for the lagoon, and primarily it impacts the water that's entering into the St. Lucie estuary, but it's still our lagoon. And the second purpose would be to allow some of that groundwater to re-enter the system, to drain back through the land and re-enter the groundwater, that surface water to re-enter. Well, at this point in time, FP&L's discussion with St. John's Water Management District, who is the permitting agency, is not really addressing the requirement to have FP&L utilize this surface water. And so I believe that it would be important for us as a utility to give input to the process, just to request them to consider using, or even to require them to use surface water should it become available. Because, as you know, the aquifer is suffering some damage in North Florida. The springs are suffering. So anything we can do to lessen the impact on the aquifer is good for all of us. And the fact that this stormwater retention area that could be built would also lessen the impact on the lagoon gives a twofold purpose. So I would just urge our committee to ask maybe Mr. Bolton to look at this issue and write a letter into the permitting agencies urging Florida Power and Light to consider using this surface water.
Judy, what's the distance between the two sites? Do
I think
you know?
it's about 6 miles.
Okay, so
Yeah.
in theory, they could run a
It's
pipe
doable. Oh, yeah. And I believe they already own the
right away.
right away.
What do you think about that?
I'm in agreement. I mean, really, if you look at it from the long-term effects of all of us as Floridians, it's best to use the least quality source of water first. So if you're looking at anything that can defer withdrawals from the Floridan aquifer for a commercial use, that there's another water source available, it's a very good idea, because I'm not a big fan of surface water treatment for potable consumption. It has too many variables. It's susceptible to too much contamination.
Okay.
The Floridan aquifer, although it's a little harder to treat than, say, the surficial aquifer, is a more stable source. It's not necessarily prone to droughts or anything else. However, it is a concern of we call it straws, punching too many straws down into an aquifer and sucking water out of it. You now affect and you create an imbalance in the environment. So you have springs like, Blue Cypress Springs, all the other springs up in the central part of the state that are all being fed from the Floridan aquifer, that you start pulling too much water out of it. Now you're not getting the quantity of the water feeding those springs, and you have aquatic life that'll start to see some damage from that. So Evans, and it may be a timing issue. That's the whole thing with what Evans is doing out there. They did notify us a couple of years ago that they were looking at building this. If they were just sending out feelers to everybody, do you need water in the future? Maybe we can be a water supplier. We really have all the water we need here in Vero Beach in the city limits. However, that is a large withdrawal of water that's going to take place out in that area, and if they can use it for stormwater, and that's St. John's job. St. John's job is to make sure that, one, they use the least quality water first, and that they don't affect other users that are out there in the system. So I think if we drafted if it's the commission's decision, we could work at drafting some type of a resolution, bring it back to you, and then you would forward it on to the city council for their execution.
That's what I think would have more impact.
And I think that's going to have more power behind it, and then it's more or less a resolution to St. John's River Water Management District that as a community we have a concern, and we're just asking them to make sure they do their job and they do it well.
And at this point, I think the St. John's language is that they're requiring FP&L to evaluate alternative surface water should it become available. that doesn't seem to be strong enough to me. It seems like they should.
It's a process.
Right.
Same with INEOS. INEOS, they came back originally and they said, we're going to use this water. And St. John said, well, we want you to evaluate other sources and see what you have. And then they came back and said, well, those sources aren't good enough quality water. Our process requires we have this good water. So then St. John's came back and said, well, maybe that's okay, but you also were going to use the water for all these other things, so therefore all those other things have to reuse reclaimed water, and they forced them to run reclaimed water to their site. So that's a process that St. John's does. I think you're on the right track. I think something coming from us as a community is something that would help St. John's when they're dealing with a large company like FPL and saying, not only are we concerned as a state agency, but the communities that you're building this facility in right next door are concerned, and therefore we're going to make sure that you do your job right.
Should we reach out to not only Indian River but St. Lucie County to kind of get them behind us?
I would, if you're going to start here, and then you can reach out to the county itself and the other, sort of like we did with the STEP system, where we started here and then worked our way out and gathered support from the community.
So will you help us draft the resolution?
I will. Yes, if that's what your intent, you want to, we'll get started with it.
All right. Well, I think we probably need a resolution. Do you just direct?
I'd like to ask a question, if I could. The author of this, is this from the Evans Group, or I'm not clear who authored?
Yeah, I believe it is. They have a feasibility study and have done a lot of research and
they
are
hired
working
some
on the funding.
consultants and stuff.
Yeah, they've hired lots of consultants.
They've been
working on it a few years.
Quite a few years. I mean, this whole concept came into play back in about 08, 09, I'd say, and it, it's water farming.
And at this point, FP&L hasn't even reached out to them to have a conversation.
Yeah.
And the reason I was asking, it says in here that they're not interested in selling water. So I don't know how that interacts back to the concept with FPL. The project is selling storage and treatment, not water. So I guess they want to recycle it back out.
Yeah,
I'm unclear from the document.
I haven't read that document that you have in front of you, but I know Evans Group they were both looking at it, and then they were looking at becoming a water utility or a raw water supply. I don't think they wanted to get into the treated business, but they wanted it from being a supplier of your water source. Then it would be up to whatever entity to treat it to whatever it needed to be. So I don't know where they are with the process. At the same time, I'll go back through some of my old emails and circle back around and get in touch with them and see where they are so that we know a little bit more for the next meeting.
Okay. All right. Well, we just want to leave it at that then for you to come back.
With
okay.
That. Thank you.
Dick Winger, Vero Beach City Council. I will be glad to take any resolution that is promulgated and passed to the Treasure Coast Council of Local Governments, which is the forum to spread it, presuming all of this really happens. We have a good forum, and I happen to be currently this year's chairman. It's no problem to put it in front. We've taken joint action with the county, the 4 counties, including Okeechobee, many times, and I'm sure if it's germane, it certainly would be considered by the group. I can bring it forward, though.
Okay, that's a good idea. Thank you.
Yeah, I can bring it forward there, too. I'm the city representative on the subcommittee of the lagoon. Actually, we're represented by Mayor Gilmore. But we have periodic meetings, and I can bring forward anything that you would like me to. The City Council agrees with the 3-party group, and Mayor Gilmore then can bring it forward to the Lagoon Coalition. Again, not a problem. I mean, it's procedural, something that we're supposed to do.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. Okay. All right. I guess let's move on to the next additional item regarding the city's representative on the Florida Municipal Power agency. So who would like to start the discussion on that? Currently, Mr. O'Connor is the city's representative in those meetings.
I'm going to suggest that we consider moving that, postponing it to a time when, because Chairman Stradley is absent. Also, it wasn't on the agenda. But thirdly, I don't know how many people on the commission have read. There is background information on this, since a number of people are new to the commission. I believe it was, and Sherry can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it was in March of last year, there was a proposed letter from Chairman Whittle, who was the chairman of the Utilities Commission at that time. There also was another piece of correspondence that had to do with this topic. I don't recall now exactly what it was, but I think we might want to have the benefit of that, and also it would give the opportunity for Chairman Stradley to be present.
Okay, we did have some small amount of discussion on this at the last meeting, but I'm fine if the rest of the commission is in agreement to put it on formally on the agenda of the next regularly scheduled meeting.
I believe the next meeting is a joint meeting with the finance. So
I wouldn't do it on that one. I'd do
Correct.
it at our scheduled meeting would be my suggestion.
Yes, and
I agree.
Sherry, could you let us know if March last year was the month that background information was available? I mean, not this minute, but could you
Right, I'll
check?
have to research it, and I'll give you what I
Okay.
find. I'll just send
Okay.
it out to the members, anything I can find on it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, all right. In that case, let's move on to chairman's matters. I have none. Members' matters. All right. Hearing none. And any other items? If not, I'd ask for a motion to adjourn.
If I could just ask briefly, the other handouts that we had were just more of an informational point for us to.
The stormwater, that's the meeting that you have coming up.
Correct.
So that's the backup for that meeting.
And then is there an action item, or this was just the report that was turned in?
That's the report that's being turned in.
Thank you.
Okay.
Before you adjourn real quick, I am trying to distribute to you all the information we get from FMPA. Bob, I know that you've listened in on the audit, and
Right.
feel free to use those numbers and listen in on any of those meetings that you wish to do so. So it's
Yeah. On that point, the only questions that were asked during that meeting were from Mr. O'Connor, myself, and Glenn Brevant of the Finance Commission. Otherwise, it would just rip on through this meeting. So I found that very interesting.
Mr. Chairman, one other thing, excuse me, before we adjourn. I failed to announce that, remember in March at our last meeting, we decided to have someone from FMPA come and talk to us about the solar farm that they're proposing, just for educational purposes, and they will be here at our March meeting. I think that's on March 8th.
All right.
So just put that in your
Okay.
thinking.
Move for adjournment.
Did I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The meeting is adjourned.